The time has come for my people to go.
I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's what the people demand. We gonna keep fighting till we get that land. I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's time to rise to get what we want. We got to organize.
Good morning, good day, good afternoon, good evening, good night, good comrades, good people, wherever you are in the world. This is the Pantsula Podcast, represented by the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. I am Jamilah. I am here with Comrade Jesse. And if you were not aware of the objective of the All-African People's Revolutionary Party, it is a unified Africa under scientific socialism. If you have any questions in regards to that, you can contact us. You can also go to the A-APRP's international website, which is AAPRP-intl.org. And as usual, without the ancestors, there would be no us doing this work. We honor our ancestors every single episode. And who are our ancestors today, Jesse?
Today, we are honoring two ancestors, first of which is Albert Woodfox, who was born in New Orleans in February of 1947. Albert Woodfox was a political prisoner and a Black Panther veteran who was in solitary confinement for 43 years. As a part of the Angola Three, including Robert King and Herbert Wallace, they were all accused of killing Brent Miller in 1972. The decade-long stints were done as a countermeasure to prevent Black Panther organization in the Angola prison. Released in 2016, he remained a committed activist, speaking against solitary confinement and touring around the world with his book Solitary, which was published in 2019. The second ancestor we're honoring today would be Theresa Ramasham, who is a political prisoner in Azania, where she was accused alongside with 5 other men, her being the first woman to face the death penalty under the apartheid regimen. They were known as the Sharpeville Six, all charged with the September 1984 murder of Jacob Dlamini, a Lakoa Township councilor. She was accused of inciting the crowd to kill Dlamini, though not of participating in the attack herself. Women from the ANC Women's Section and AAM's Women's Committee demonstrated support for Theresa. She was sentenced to 18 years. Being a part of the ANC, the Africa's National Congress, she continued to speak about her injustice for her experience in prison until meeting the ancestors in November 25th, 2015. So we want to thank both of those ancestors who have committed their life to the struggle, and we honor our ancestors every day.
Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. And they had no fear. You have to have a minimal to no amount of fear to be able to do this work, because there's a lot of forces at work. And this is what we're addressing on this episode, the culture of fear. We're seeing the feds ramp up a lot of action against activists, against organizers, against folks who are particularly organizing against imperialism, organizing against capitalism. So even if you are saying, I don't want any trouble, I don't want to have anything to do with this, we're all directly affected by that. So what happened when they assassinated Martin Luther King? They did a lot of scare tactics to say, well, this can happen to you. This happened to you when could happen to you when they assassinated El-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz. So this idea that if you don't get involved, nothing will happen to you, we're all being washed in one way or another. So if you think that there's a problem, why not do something about the problem? Be active against the problem. And if you feel like something's going to be negatively impacted because you are attached to the system in some way, the court system or child support or whatever, figure out ways you can do that, and figure out ways you can organize to create a better world for all of us, because the system certainly isn't doing it. So fear, what's the acronym? False evidence appearing real. That's what people say fear is. I think there's something to that. Obviously, the word fear does have a definition, but I think that is an accurate description if you're talking about 10 seconds or less. False evidence appearing real. So you have McCarthyism. You have what's happening now, the Red Scare / McCarthyism / the Cold War / all of these things. And we're seeing a ramp up of that. McCarthyism never left. The Red Scare never left. And you have things like the malign Russian Africa Act that's being discussed right now. And again, the feds are ramping up their actions and their surveillance against African organizers with somehow the idea, they're colluding with Russia, whatever that means. So there's also a HR 350, which talks about the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act of 2022. Police terrorism is domestic terrorism as far as I'm concerned, but of course that's not what they're talking about. So what they are addressing here, which was passed in the House on the 18th of May, 2022. So the bill establishes new requirements to expand the availability of information on domestic terrorism, as well as the relationship between domestic terrorism and hate crimes. It authorizes domestic terrorism components within the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Justice, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation to monitor, analyze, investigate, and prosecute domestic terrorism. The domestic terrorism components of DHS, DOJ, and the FBI must jointly report on domestic terrorism, including white supremacist-related incidents or attempted incidents. DHS, DOJ, and the FBI must review the anti-terrorism training and resource programs of their agencies that are provided to federal, state, local, and tribal law enforcement agencies. Additionally, DOJ must make training on prosecuting domestic terrorism available to its prosecutors and to assistant U.S. attorneys. It creates an interagency task force to analyze and combat white supremacist and neo-Nazi infiltration of the informed services and federal law enforcement agencies. Finally, it directs the FBI to assign a special agent or hate crimes liaison to each field office to investigate hate crimes incidents with a nexus to domestic terrorism. So, of course, on paper, they support something like that. But given this country is rooted in white supremacist terror among the masses, that's not what's coming into play. Who's going to be affected by all of these bills, all of these acts? Folks who are politically, economically, and so forth marginalized and oppressed. That is who is going to be directly affected by HR 350 and other bills like this. As we are seeing, once again, the feds are surveilling and sweeping into organizers' houses, facilities, and so on. As Dylan Roof got to go to eat hamburgers with the cops because he was hungry. He literally, openly was a white supremacist.
He was fed.
He was fed by the police because the system of policing is one that protects white supremacy. So you can't get to the root of domestic terrorism without understanding the system of domestic terrorism, and policing is one of those things. So this idea about who and what we should fear, they are ramping that up tremendously, and all people should be aware of that. Not just organizers, but of course organizers are already aware of that, hopefully. But every single person I mentioned McCarthyism. There were people who had nothing to do with any of this. They weren't organizers, but they may have said one word to an organizer and they got swept up in it.
Right.
They had a job with an organizer and they got swept up into it. So do not think for a second that you will not be directly affected by these bills. The culture of fear is real. They are ramping it up because they understand that more and more people understand that the system is a problem. So more and more people are looking into why there's a problem. People are beginning to look into organizing or some kind of activism. So they have to ramp up yet again, just like they always do when more and more people understand there's a problem and more people act on creating solutions to the problem. So this is really the root of all that. The culture of fear is based on the understanding that more and more people know the basis on some level of the culture of terror upon all of our bodies. So let's not get that twisted. Like, we're all affected by this, whether we are organizers or not, whether we have a bulk of the information or a tiny modicum of the information. We can see this where veterans, people who were workers doing rescue for September 11th, 2001, people who had health issues, who are not getting healthcare provisions because folks in the government are like, oh, you know, it's somehow not important. So I do want to say this little thing before you get into it, Jesse, and we're going to talk about fear because that's really what is at the root of this. Fear of the masses organizing against the system. So there were some Senate Republicans, as you already know, for us, there's really not a lot of difference between Democrats and Republicans. They all openly support imperialism. They all openly support capitalism and colonialism and neocolonialism. So for us, there's not much of a difference because who's being affected by that? Folks in the global South, folks who are politically, economically, socially marginalized and oppressed. However, for this, it is interesting because there are some Republican Senate folks who decided to not vote on a bill, which is the PACT Act, which would have helped tremendously with veterans. It would have helped tremendously with rescue workers to just have basic health care. But they said, well, it's not that important to us. So there was some opposition to the PACT Act. The PACT Act is HR 3967. So it is honoring our PACT Act of 2022. So it did pass in the Senate on June 16, 2022. And so it addresses healthcare, presumption of service connection, research resources, and other matters related to veterans who were exposed to toxic substances during military service. So Section 103, it provides eligibility for Department of Veterans Affairs or VA medical care, including mental health services and counseling to veterans who, one, participated in a toxic exposure risk activity, e.g. a qualifying activity that requires a corresponding entry in an exposure tracking record system, such as the individual longitudinal exposure record, two, served in specific locations on specified dates, or three, deployed in support of a specified contingency operation. Section 104. The VA must complete an assessment to determine, one, the personnel and material resources necessary to implement the expanded provision of care to the veterans specified in Section 103 of this bill, e.g., veterans who participated in a toxic exposure risk activity, and two, the number of veterans who served in a specified locations on specified dates and received hospital care or medical services from the VA, disaggregated by priority group, and so on. It's important to read these bills, and it's important to know there are people out there, people are talking about Roe v. Wade. This, to me, applies as well. They want you to do the labor that they are not going to do. And then they go with this culture of fear, like weapons of mass destruction. Oh, you have to fight for our freedom. You have to fight for our liberty. They're not even that. That's the immigration issue.
Right, exactly.
But
yes.
The idea that they are selling this role as a soldier to protect our freedoms. And they come back with lung issues. They come back with cancer. And then what do they say to you?
You're
we don't feel like providing health care for you. So this is what they think about you. It's okay that your labor is being exploited, but your humanity, who cares about that? So with Roe v. Wade, they're also saying, well, we care about the unborn. We care about the unborn. Like, they have to come into this world. But when they do come into this world, what happens? They don't get health care. You have to pay thousands upon thousands of dollars just to even have a child.
Just to have a baby.
And then you have to pay money to even touch your child. And then you pay thousands of dollars to go in the ambulance. So this very much is not a system that cares about people. And this extends into the military. So this idea that we somehow we're going to save our people from the enemy. Who is the enemy? When you ask people who the enemy is, a lot of people cannot tell you. So they are ramping up, again, this idea of fear. So people will enlist in the military, and then many people go in and they're like, oh, wait, why am I here? I feel so disillusioned now. And then people come back amputees. People come back with cancer. People come back with all sorts of ailments. People come back with PTSD. And then there is not enough money allocated to care for the people whose labor was exploited. Some people went specifically because it will help them pay for their college education. Some people went because, well, this will help me pay for whatever my family needs. There are various reasons people choose to go into the military. That said, this is not an episode about what we think about the military. But this is the root of it, which is exploitation of labor. So whatever reason people go into the military, they come back understanding their labor was exploited. More and more people are coming back with the understanding that this system does not care about them. And we've been talking about that the whole time, but now more and more people realize it. But they ramp up this fear, and now it's Russia, Russia, Russia.
Right.
And now it's like you are creating these bills to go into the affairs of Africa, saying, well, we have to understand that you cannot collude with all of this stuff. So there's another ramp up. And I guarantee you, with the non-support of the PACT Act and all this stuff, I guarantee you they are having another conversation about a draft. I mean, they've been having one, but the less people that are going to be willing to sign up to go into the military, they're having that conversation.
Absolutely.
Will there be another draft? I cannot predict the future, but I guarantee you the more and more people who are understanding the nature of this system, who are understanding the nature of the U.S., people are gonna be like, I'm not signing that. I'm not believing you.
Right.
Why should I believe the weapons of mass destruction story? Why should I believe that? I went in and I got my legs blown off. I went in and I literally cannot function because of my PTSD. More and more people are understanding this. And so I guarantee you they have a plan in place in case they don't have the percentages they want or need to labor for imperialist war. They are like, there's a draft around the corner. It's like right there. So will they install the draft?
But it's to your point. I think when you just speak about fear, I think, that's a good definition, false evidence appearing real. And it starts really early. Speaking of the draft, it's like a lot of these military recruitments, they start middle school, even elementary. They want kids to know that, and then with movies like Top Gun and films that promote you can fly in the sky, you can have this power, you could be this cool air pilot and commit all of this violence, but at least you have the status, at least you have the prestige of being a part of a system that is dominant. And obviously the call of military and imperialism, no one is thinking about those connections. It's just like the face of being popular, the face of having the ability to trample down on someone and be like, oh, well, this is America. This is America. Like, this is who we are. And it's like, everything's changing. America is aware of that. That's why the propaganda is going, because they're seeing these changes. And these changes are because the material conditions have still not been met. People are still poor. People are still being kicked out of their homes. People are still lacking the access to live a happy or just a comfortable life, a healthy life. Because with the conditions of the police and everything, it's very hard for a lot of folks. And a lot of folks are, I think, buying into that fear because they're like, oh, they can recognize the problem. But then the call to action is, okay, what are we going to do about that problem? How are we going to gather together and organize so that we structurally address it, as opposed to just like react to what we already know is going to be horrible, because the history shows already that this is something that's consistent with. I mean, this is 101 with America. Like, we can't really be that surprised.
I think a lot of people understand there's a problem, but it may not have personally affected them, or they didn't have direct ties to a community who is affected by what we're addressing. And even if people's primary sources are capitalist news networks, they're not understanding the role that imperialism plays. So I think there's a lot of factors to why somebody might just be aware that this is going on. And you or I, as organizers, and me having studied for years, have that understanding. But this is why, doing this type of work requires compassion. It requires patience.
Yes.
It requires a lot, because if it really were the case, we would be like, well, what took you so long? So understand that, especially if we were born into this part of the world, the second you enter this world, right, they're already throwing all these dynamics at you, for these gender lines, for the goodness of capitalism. And even when talking about capitalism, people look at it as primarily an economic system.
Right.
But you cannot just have an economic system when a capitalist system literally goes in there to alter laws. They literally go in there and destabilize democratically elected governments. I mean, this is beyond economics.
Yes, absolutely.
And so when you even have, speaking of gender, a capitalist system, what Malcolm X says, like, show me capitalists and then I'll show race. So to not acknowledge the factors of white supremacy, of patriarchy, all of these things under the umbrella of capitalism, and to simply say it's an economic system, if that were the case, then we wouldn't be seeing at least a quarter of the problems that we're seeing. We wouldn't be seeing whole countries have not just francophone economies, but also the official language is French or whatever. Like, we wouldn't even have that if capitalism was simply economic. Like, if it was simply economic, then people would be able to sit at the table and trade on their own terms if it was merely an economic system. So even informing people or subjugating people to this idea that is primarily economic. That's also part of the culture of fear, because when you encourage that and say, okay, the market decides everything in the marketplace of ideas, and we're able to have these exchanges, when you couch it in flowery language and just say it's about economics, but not understanding the relationship to labor, that's when people are going to go, oh, okay, light bulb go off. But that culture of fear is also the culture of omission. So going back to what I said earlier, it is this fear that the fact that when people have this understanding, when people study and people are waking up and more people are like, joining an organization isn't that bad of an idea. That's going to wake up that culture of fear. And that's when it's ramped up. And so when people are saying, oh, communism killed 11 billion people, right, and they just ration everything, like, that's fear. That's fear. As opposed to, hey, a whole people having self-determination? How is that bad? So you can't tell people that. And so they literally are like, well, you want everything handed to you, and right, you want the government to tell you. The government tells you what to do in the U.S.
Right.
So yeah, there's the illusion of free speech, but there's only a certain, and this has nothing to do with the responsibilities of being kind to people or understanding people's conditions. That has nothing to do with that. Right. But what people call PC, that's another aspect of culture of the fear, is that actually treating people as a human, as a sentient being or whatever. That's somehow PC. And so all of that goes with the culture of fear, that the idea that people who have been oppressed and marginalized are now speaking up. And so now that's being taken over by the gay mafia or whatever. Like, all of these things are connected. So to say none of that has to do with the umbrella of capitalism, and capitalism is merely or simply economic. Capitalism is ideological. Capitalism is economic. Capitalism is social. Capitalism is all of these things, as are other systems. So when you finally learn about the history of these systems, and also you have to go beyond Europe, because when people are addressing socialist movements, people are addressing socialism itself outside of Europe, it tends to be connected to anti-imperialist thought and movements. But what are they just Marx?
Marx,
people haven't even read Marx. People haven't read Lenin. People haven't read Engels. People haven't read any of these things, but somehow they have an idea of what socialism is. That somehow it's just the state taking over, and then communism, the state just, it's what?
Right. And so like, what is capitalism? Like, when folks talk about capitalism,
it's when you just trade and
the
market just right. You can open your own business, or just let the market decide. And yeah.
And it takes a hold on a lot of folks, with these new conversations of cryptocurrency and metaverse, and just all of these different ways people feel like they got to get the bag. Like, we're in this culture of getting the bag, getting money. And it's like, that doesn't address why we don't have this money. Like, why don't we have these resources? It's a reason why. I mean, this has been the case for a long time, and folks want to say, oh, it's because I didn't grind hard enough. It's because I didn't work hard enough. I didn't go to school long enough. I didn't do all of these things that we're built to believe in, because of the fear is telling us you can do more. You need to invest in this. You take your attention here. Don't organize. Don't collectively, strategically gather together and figure out what the problem is, but instead go into your own vacuum and buy stuff. And buying stuff and getting services that are all supposed to be the benefit of self-care and living this best life. It's like, the world right now has a problem. We can do something about that problem. But to say that problem doesn't deal, like, the problem is away from us, or that problem really doesn't, is, as you said, like, until it gets to our front door, till we actually experience it, Then it's like, oh, yo, did you see what happened? This sucks. Like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? Like, this is so awful. This is like the government, we voted and nothing's happening. Yeah, exactly. There's a better way. The only way to really fit it, we have to organize because, I mean, just that the power of having a political education and understanding how these systems are influencing you daily. It's not, as you said, it's not just one element of the economy. It's like your labor, all of the diseases that are gained through a lot of these jobs. I mean, and you're still expected to perform. No consideration of those with disabilities. Like there's so much just expectation for you to work and perform with nothing given. And yet we're just supposed to swallow that this is the greatest country on earth and we should be blessed to live here.
With that, there's particular groups who tend to be targeted under this culture of fear. And as you mentioned, folks who profit off of labor, those are ultimately some of the biggest criminals, but yet they are seen as something to aspire to. I want to be the next Bill Gates. I want to be like Elon Musk. I want to be like whoever, Jeff Bezos, just fill in the blank. But these are people who exploit labor, steal people's ideas, have no problem jacking resources from other countries.
We can coup whoever we want, according to Elon Musk.
So yeah, I support coup in Bolivia because, let's steal all the lithium. So these are ultimately criminals. Like there should be no such thing as a billionaire. There, no such thing as long as people's labor are getting exploited. And so these are the people where the drivers, they cannot get bathroom breaks because they have to be delivering on a certain time window. That's criminal. And yet that's somehow accepted because the system somehow works.
Right.
So there's criminal acts that are absolutely accepted under a capitalist society. And yet someone who is just like, I love animals. I'm gonna, whatever. So the Earth Liberation Front, Animal Liberation Front, those are several groups who have been on the domestic terrorism list for years. And so, of course, they are currently on that list still. And, they focus on white supremacists. But once again, that is not going to be the direct target because the system benefits from white supremacy. You think they're going to snatch up every white supremacist? Of course not. Of course not. The system needs it too much. So who's going to be probably going to repeat this several other times? People who are organizers, people who are working towards self-determination for the masses of people. Those are the people who are going to get snatched up. So while they keep having this January 6th trial or whatever, the people who supported what happened January 6th are still sitting there in Senate. They're still sitting there in government official offices.
It's funny how that works. Huh.
Yeah, it is funny how it works.
Yeah, it's almost like it's all connected and like they're strategically planning this. And it's a show to just get people to not really focus on the primary issue and to just go on all of these other moments and to not really understand that the system itself, no matter who you talking about, a senator or a party, the Democrats or the Republicans, they're objectively in line with the corporate oligarchs that are not giving us anything. It's just our labor is all they want. And, and every time I talk to folks about this, is as you said, I don't think folks are unaware of the fact that there's a problem because we all see these merging realities coming in. It's like, oh, there's so much work and I'm not getting paid for it. Everything's going up. How are we going to really answer this? Like, what do they expect us to do? That's the general, like, what do they expect us to do? And the information we're getting from them is to just be comfortable with it and work around it, just not really challenge it, just understand that this is the way they're denying that we're I mean, the recession has always been real to us, those who are, working class and poor. But folks hear that and they're like, oh, things are really bad, Joe. Like, since COVID, now all of these other things happening, what's going to happen next? And again, a lot of the response is fear-based. It's not like understanding how these systems are intentionally writing laws to continue this oppression. There's not going to be a moment where they realize maybe we should stop doing this. They understand that there's been activity of resistance. The moment more and more people wake up, they're like, okay, we got to give them another curveball. The distractions and the way they work and the way they influence just in every aspect of our lives, from what we watch, from what we hear, all of the information. So it's just very important to have that diligent mind and understand that this comes from a source. It's not, nothing just shows up out of nowhere. Like, there's not just these isolated moments of any attack. There are definitely targeted strategic attacks.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are the various levels of fear that have been used historically and even in the present set? So you talked about McCarthyism, talked about the Red Scare, there's the Cold War, there's all of these factors. But what are some more modern versions of that?
Ooh. I mean, I feel like social media is a gateway to a lot of that fear, because they'll use petty bourgeois folks, people who are a part of the music industry and in the movie industry, who may be a part of a role that is appealing, like they're a superhero. They have this personality that is attractive, but their role in their movie, or if the songs you listen to, is like they're continuing the status quo. They're not really talking about anything that's different. And I think a lot of people really put trust in just what we're hearing, or, we want to believe that the system can, well, I don't want to believe that, but there are folks that believe that the system can possibly change and that there's something that could possibly be done. But that is encouraged through this loop of reinforcing the mediums we get from capitalist media, is all just to remain docile and to keep ourselves just under this impression that the way things go, there'll be a little moment of uproar, but then things will just roll over to what they are. So I think, to your question, like, some of the modern forms of fear is just showing that things are not really that, like, things aren't changing. Things are just, going the way they go. And when they change, there'll be a hard reset. We'll just we'll tap around the keyboard, we change a couple of numbers or whatever, and then we can get back to the usual. But then when it breaks down, ultimately people start feeling it's like, okay, this is different. We got to change this, because it's clearly not working for us to just continually do the same things we've been doing. We got to do it different. We have to, what they say, you do the same thing over and over without making a difference. It's insanity. You got to do a difference so that difference can be made. In light of this being Black August, I've been reading again George Jackson, Blood in My Eye, and there's a part in which he talks about having a materialist analysis. And I wanted to just read a quote where he says, "We're looking for connections. The materialist approach is to examine things in their total sequence, see them in process, not to merely establish their being in fixed sequential images, but to take in the state of being in process, infancy, maturity, decline, things in motion, infancy, processed into other things in motion. We're constantly laboring to determine that which governs, regulates, motivates all the separate but related and interrelated processes from the viewpoint that consciousness is determined by dialectical objective development." And, just reading that, and just this whole book, it just really invigorates me, because it shows how long this struggle has been in motion. But to understand that all of these things are connected, they're not so, separated. If we learn, the more we study and we recognize these connections and understand that we're relationship people. I mean, we talk about socialism because we're social beings. We're like social beings, y'all. And if we talk, we communicate with one another and really gather on that collective level, we won't be so, because I feel like there's this vacuum encouragement, like just stay in your vacuum, stay in your lane, no one needs to help you. And that goes again to the point of fear, where folks don't want to talk to each other about their pain. don't want to share with each other the embarrassment of not having that bill paid or the embarrassment of not having enough resources, because it's like, well, I don't want to seem like I don't have it. And so you just go into yourself. And that's an intentional thing where you know, and everyone else around us is struggling. But the fact that we have this cloak of shame, this cloak of, I can't let anyone know this because I don't want to be seen as not working hard enough. I mean, I just feel like that's something we got to constantly work on and be more comfortable with each other so that we understand we can take care of each other. We can organize collectively and establish a situation where we don't feel there's an isolation and there's embarrassment needed, because this system is hurting us all. And if we all recognize that, we can help each other instead of just feeling like this is just our fate and no one, you know, and feel like this is just our fault. Like it's something we're a part of. Addressing it in that vacuum gives you that whole sense of loss of dignity. Like, okay, I gotta grind hard enough. It's me. It's like, nah, it's not. It's a system that's causing this. It's a system that's making us afraid. And by waking up to that, we'll be in a better situation, because there's been folks that's done the work. It's not like it's not been done before. But if we think that it's just us and it ain't anyone else, that it's just me, I'm the only one out here. It's like, you're not. There have been movements, there have been organizations, there have been many fronts to counter this problem.
Yay. Are there any final words for this episode?
Join an organization fighting for justice. We say it all the time. It's a message that's true, because, I mean, that's what's causing this action. Things are changing. Be involved in that change. It's one of the best decisions I've done. And I think anyone that makes that decision will be better for it. The world will be better for it if we're all collectively together in this struggle. So that's the last words I have to say.
Yay! I absolutely concur with you. Join an organization. Absolutely. If you feel, if you think, if you know a problem exists, you take action to create a solution to that problem. This is just a much larger problem that needs all of us to contribute to the solution. So it can't just be myself and Jesse. It can't just be us and 5 other people. It has to be the masses to have that understanding that a solution needs to be had. And we have other comrades who understand this as well. They create content. So there's our ancestors' voices. That is comrades Ajamu and Shakura. We have our comrades in the Southwest chapter. They do Pan-African news. Then there's the Revolutionary African Women. And there's also the Forward Ever podcast. There's also the Forward Ever shop. If you are like, yeah, I'm doing some stuff out here, and
yeah,
I have
you got your
no
African period. I know you got your African period.
But yeah, if you're out here doing stuff and you want to show where you stand, and like, you know, I'm just gonna be a visual representation of the work I do. There's the Forward Ever shop. All the links will be in the description. But we say it 20 times during the episode. Well, probably not that many times, but
at least 5,
say it several
times.
During at least, exactly. I don't know how many times did we say it today. Okay, join an organization. There's 5. There's your 5. Okay.
Join an organization.
There's 6, 7. That is the one request that we ask of you, because it takes all of us to do this work. Because you know what's massively organized? Capitalism.
Right. They didn't stop. They still going.
They are 24/7, 365, 360. What is it? Whatever on a leap year? I don't know. But they never stop. So we should either. Thank you so much for listening, watching, whatever you do with this episode, being involved in an organization as well. We thank you in advance, or if you're already on one, we thank you. And as we end with every episode, forward ever, backwards never.
Forward.